Actually, there's one writer that I can read when I'm writing, which is Elmore Leonard.
Okay.
And that's only if I'm writing in that mode with that sort of the white collar crime thrillers that I write, because they're increasingly more irreverent and not entirely serious. Whereas the spy stuff, that you can't write it that way. At least I can't. But Elmore Leonard is probably my favorite. He is definitely my favorite contemporary writer.
Yeah.
And I regret that he passed away recently and a couple of years ago. And I've read almost of everything of his, and I guess what I'll have to be satisfied with is rereading some of it, because he won't be putting out any new stuff. I always have admired F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I once said to somebody, I'd love to write a novel like The Great Gatsby. I'd love to be able to write like F. Scott Fitzgerald. And somebody once said to me, well, why don't you? I said, because I can't write like F. Scott Fitzgerald.
I want to paint the Sistine Chapel also.
Right. If I could write like that, I'd write like that.
Yeah. I remember someone
mostly
once,
thrillers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, someone once wrote a review of The Great Gatsby, and it was recent, and talking about how it wasn't really an important story, and it wasn't, this didn't make sense. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how do you critique something that's beautiful? You know what I mean? Just the words are just so beautifully put together. It's just such a foolish thing to try to critique F. Scott Fitzgerald. It really is. But anyway. So F. Scott and Elmore Leonard. That's pretty interesting.
And I read Le Carre. I like Graham Greene a lot. He's not really, I would call, specifically a thriller writer, but he writes a lot in that genre. He also wrote literary type fiction. So Grisham I still read once in a while. I think the best thriller ever written is Frederick Forsyth's The Day of the Jackal.
Oh yeah, unbelievable.
And maybe up there with that is 3 Days of the Condor.
No, these are great books. Great books. These are the books that we read when we were younger, or with me, I was commuting on the train and reading a book, just about every 2 weeks, finishing a new book, reading all these thrillers. And I think for a lot of people, these are the building blocks for why they want to write.
There's no question. I don't see how you could want to be a writer if you don't love to read.
Yeah, absolutely. This is these are like the Miles Davis and the Eric Claptons and the Beatles of writing. So it really is great stuff. And if you haven't read any of these books that David mentioned, go read them, please. Now, did you get formal training, like how to put together a story? Where? Go ahead.
No, not until I hired an editor. I mean, that was when I wrote my second book. I did a lot of reading of books on writing, which helped me a lot with learning how to structure a novel. Because when I wrote my first book, I didn't have, there was just no structure to it. I just started writing. And I was outlining, and I was doing it in an organized fashion, but I had no training. And so I finished the second book, and I had a dear friend at Rothschild, a guy named Sidney Grusin, who was in the office next to me, and he was in his 80s by then. He was a senior advisor. He was a former vice chairman of the New York Times, and he knew everybody. And so he said, if you want, he read my second book. He said, I really like it. It would make a great movie. Do you want me to send it to some agent friends of mine? I said, what, are you kidding me? Of course. So he sent it to a bunch of very prominent literary agents in New York, one of whom was, I learned after the fact, was one of the most prominent literary agents in New York. And she actually read it, and she called me up and said, this really isn't bad for somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. And if you would like to learn, I can introduce you to some people who can teach you. So she gave me the names of 3 thriller editors, one of whom was a guy named Richard Marek, who was Robert Ludlum's first editor. He edited Ludlum's first 8 or 9 novels.
Okay.
And so I said, "What, are you kidding me? I mean, this is a guy who can teach me how to write a thriller," and he did.
Yeah.
So I would meet with Richard probably once a week, once every 2 weeks, and we'd have lunch and talk about it. And he, I was always mailing him my revisions. And over the period of 18 months, he taught me how to write a thriller, and that became my second book. Became the first book I released, Trojan Horse.
Yeah, it's and dealing with one of the things I wanted to say, and what you just said reminded me of it, and I'm going to go a little off the script here, but we met because I sought out you, just like you sought out these other people. And I want the listeners to know that, as you're trying to do your next thing or make your transition into your next step, whatever it may be, don't be afraid to ask for help. Now, I know you're too modest to talk about this, so I'm going to tell the listeners, I was struggling myself with my first book in the same stage that you were at, and I didn't know what to do. And I just went on websites of all the authors in my genre. And I went on their websites and I contacted them and I asked them if they have any advice or like to meet. And, of course, you were nice enough to actually meet me for lunch. Now, we met right outside of Grand Central. I'm sure, you were on your way to Grand Central, so it worked for everyone. But I do remember what you told me, and I don't know if you remember what you told me, but what you said about my first book was you have to put your stake in the ground. Like you have to, it's like you made the analogy of the Oklahoma land rush, where you had to run out and like put your flag in the ground, and that's where you were, and that's what I did. And from that point on, everything rolled, I guess pretty well. So ask for help, people. That is a very important point. So here you are. Now you finally feel like you're starting to get rolling, right? How many rejections did you get? How many times were you rejected, do you think?
I can't count them. I took the traditional publishing approach, and I would send out query letters, and you read a book on how to write a query letter, and you have somebody look at it for you, and hundreds and hundreds, certainly, and could even have been 1,000. I don't know, over a period of years. So, I had a finished novel that was edited by a professional editor, and I got some contacts from Richard. But that was the process. You couldn't submit it to a publisher without having an agent.
Yeah.
And I didn't want a crummy agent. I wanted a good agent, so I started at the top and I worked my way down. And then I started going to this thing called Thriller Fest, which is a group of people that get together and they talk about thrillers and they have presentations, and they have an element of it called Craft Fest, where the established authors give classes in certain types of things. And then they also have a thing called Agent Fest, where a bunch of agents come in and you get, I think it's 6 minutes to pitch your novel.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of little desks in these rooms, and people are lined up by these agents, and you get 6 minutes to pitch your novel. And and then in fact, to prepare for Thriller Fest, I read a book by a Hollywood development a guy, and it was called Selling Your Story in 60 Seconds. It was how to do a verbal pitch. Okay. And on a whim, I saw his phone number in the back, and I called him, and he picked up his answering machine, and we talked, and he said, yeah, I'll coach you through that. So I hired him as a consultant. It wasn't very expensive, and he taught me how to do a pitch. And at the end of that, he said, at the end of the coaching, he said, and I had to give him the outlines for my books. I had 2 books I was pitching. Because the first book I wrote, I made into a novel after I learned how to write one. And that became my third book I released, called Bull Street. But he said, I can help you punch up these outlines. I'm a script development guy. This is what I do for a living. And I can help you make these into better stories, which I hired him to do, and so that helped me improve both of my books. But in the pitch process, I got to the stage where I realized, I was still working at the time, and I would say to myself, would I hire this person if I was in my day job? And the ones that wanted to take me on, I didn't want to hire them. Why do I want some doofus representing me, or somebody who's poor at follow up and crap like that? This is this is a serious thing for me. And once you take an agent on, you're locked into him for a while.
Yeah.
So I never got off the ground with that. I never took the traditional publishing route. And it was Now, this is what I want to do. This is very important, and I think this is something that would be good for the readers to hear, but I want to wait till after our commercial break for you to talk about, the solutions, because we've all, as far as rejections, if anyone's transitioning into something, you're going to go on 100 interviews, you're going to send out letters, and I think I shared this with you once. I read where some author became an overnight success, but the real backstory is, she got rejected 137 times now. I remember thinking, wow, I wish I got 137 return letters. They didn't even bother to reject me. They just ignored me. So we're going to get into that in the second half, but now let's go to a commercial, and when we come back, David's going to continue. And like any good thriller, we're going to leave you with a little cliffhanger till the second half. And we'll be back soon. Stay with us.
More than 1 million wild animals are killed each year illegally. Poaching is a major threat to our country's wildlife. I'm Tom Barry. I'm an actor with a desire to preserve living space for wildlife. The Humane Society Wildlife Land Trust does just that. Worked with private landowners to protect wildlife, to preserve natural habitats. To learn more or to work with the Humane Society Wildlife Land Trust, call 800-729-SAVE. That's 800-729-SAVE, or visit wildlifelandtrust.org. Thank you.
Work can be fun, but it isn't fun if you get hurt on the job. Wear the proper safety equipment. When you're working outside, drink plenty of water, and don't be afraid to ask for help from your coworkers. Remember, your boss is responsible for your safety. Know your limits and your rights. Work hard and be safe. For more information, visit OSHA.gov or call 800-321-OSHA.
A message from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Welcome back, everyone. For those who have recently joined us, I'm your host, John Nuckel, and you are listening to Don't Give Up Your Daydream radio show. We're focusing on transitions in the transitioning world. When we last saw our intrepid hero, David Lender, he wasn't hanging from a cliff, but he was about to go back to the drawing board after, I believe it was, 18 months of working on his third novel that would become his first novel. I think I have it right, David?
It was the second that would become my first released. So
now here you are. You've put in a lot of work, man. You really are. You really put your shoulder down and put in the time. And you put in a lot of work, and you're still really, you don't have a book yet, do you?
No, I mean, I have
a book,
I have
but
two books,
no
but I don't have.
No one knows you have a book.
I don't have nothing published.
Yeah.
And this was